What's up YouTube? My name is Cheddar and welcome to Saltworthy, the channel where I'm going to talk about things that make me salty and explain why it's important. So we all grow up with the knowledge that there are certain words you can't say. But why? What are these words and why is it bad to say them? To preface this video, I'll come right out and say there will be no slurs or derogatory statements made towards anyone or any grouping of people. I will talk about slurs and why it is bad to say these words towards the end of the video. That being said, what is a curse word? Cuss word? Whatever. Curse words, also known as bad words, swear words, dirty words, cuss words, obscenities, expletives, and profanity, are words or phrases considered offensive. And with that wet paper bag of an explanation, I think we've cleared that one up. But perhaps, for those of us that are a bit more inquisitive, we could dig just a bit deeper. Upon that further investigation, it turns out you'd find a whole lot of baloney. Literally. Okay, not that baloney. But you would discover the phrase a whole lot of baloney instead of full of and a whole lot of other fill-in words that we use in lieu of the real deal. So personally, I just gotta say, what kind of stupid shit is I'm sorry. Allow me to compose myself. Wait a minute. Actually, what just happened there? It admittedly had an emotional reaction to the idea of people filling in words instead of saying what they actually mean, despite us all knowing what those words stand in for. But am I wrong? Most people might even agree on that being ridiculous, or for those who feel a little less strongly, silly, or my personal pet peeve, just the way it is. My fellow human beings, I sincerely implore you to never accept this as an explanation for anything in life. Just the way it is a phrase that has been weaponized to steal your hopes and dreams of making the world a better place. Ask women, they'll tell you. But getting back on point, what's the right thing to do? Should we unquestioningly comply and not use these words that I hope I've properly demonstrated are for self-expression? Or do we completely reject that silly rule? That is just the way it is. I can certainly tell you that neither one of those is the right answer. But to find the right answer, we're going to need to break it down a little more specifically. So what words are we talking about specifically? Because from what I see, it appears there are far more words that we use to fill in for curse words than actual bad words. So obviously the sentiment of these words are so important, we are literally refusing to exclude them. So most swears come down to these four categories: personal insults, and fill-in words. Fill-in words pretty much stand in for the other three categories, and it's with the other three categories that we run into our first problem. One of these things is not like the others. By the way, I originally had body parts as its own category until I realized that the use of those words are essentially exclusively used as personal insults. Y'all, we have got to do better. And it is this category, personal insults, that I would agree, in most cases, probably should be avoided. And for the most part, the other two categories, the very two specific words, are used mostly as adjectives. Sometimes can be used as part of a personal insult, but overall, these two words, and are meant to convey strong emotion. And oddly enough, if you Google the keywords, why are curse words bad, in the given definition at the top, says exactly that in highlighted text. This is one of the most disturbing parts for me. What does that mean? Because to me, it says that strong emotions are bad, or at the very least, shouldn't be expressed. Isn't there something kind of wrong with that? Because for me, it's not only wrong, it flies right in the face of our freedom to express ourselves. Also, with my stance being purely against purity culture, I feel like we should be able to reclaim many words that are used to describe body parts, because hearing grown people refer to vaginas as hoo-ha's is a bit embarrassing. It's through the suppression of self-expression that they prevent us from advocating against the injustice they commit against us. Because those words can be specifically ignored or weaponized at any moment to disregard anything legitimate you have to say by writing you off as disrespectful. The range of available punishments, in fact, sway all the way from feigned indifference to getting your dumbass fired for screaming, "Fuck off, you fucking piece of shit," in your boss's face. Now, was that disrespectful to say? Sure. Was it too far? I might agree. But I would enjoy some context surrounding the situation that made a person choose this course of action. I posit that outbursts of incredulity are quite reasonable when contextualized by years of putting up with just the way it is, while being completely barred from outward expression. But more than justifying my own stupidity, I say all this in the hopes that people who view this might approach the topic with nuance and empathy for anyone who slaves daily for subsistence wages. So one of the more annoying questions we have to ask is where this forbidden list of words comes from. Many people accept at face value that these words are bad, without any understanding for why that is. And here we have the crux upon which the argument I'm bolstering rests. The U.S.'s Christian founding and puritanical influences are the driving force behind our devout acceptance that these words are bad. Luckily, all the proof you could ever ask for is found in the definition and the etymology of the word profanity. It is only this thread that needs to be pulled for any argument against mine to fall apart. There is no other measure upon which to determine these words as bad, other than a lame-ass appeal to tradition, or, in other words, another just the way it is. This should probably come as no surprise, but due to the founding of this country by the group known as the Puritans, the Christian influence can be traced clear back to its roots. Despite the lie that this country was founded on freedom of religion, many of its laws are still heavily influenced by Christianity, which at the very least is proof in and of itself that even if we had freedom of religion, we certainly do not have freedom from religion. And if we're being honest, how is it possible to be free to choose your religion when your governmental body favors one religion over any other form of religion? It just purely doesn't make sense. Not many people have ever put much time into pushing back against this belief in any substantive way, all the while accepting the establishment's right to dictate the terms of engagement. One of the only instances of an approach on this topic is from that of the comedian George Carlin. George Carlin was a great comedian, well known for his transgressive views on his interesting choices of topics. The 7 dirty words you can't say on TV or radio was one of his most well-known skits, and was well-liked at the time. But after the initial novelty, there was no national conversation sparked, and beyond pointing and laughing at the goofy man saying the bad words, the special experienced its normal 15 minutes of fame and was subsequently forgotten, much like many other controversial cultural phenomena. Looking back on that period, oddly enough, you'll notice an absence of a moral panic led by the media over this divisive and hotly contested issue. It's not very reminiscent of the U.S.'s current political climate, even though this society's always been quite obsessed with decency and the individual actions of people and how they may be perceived. So I chose this topic as my first because it's a conversation that I would hate to let slip into the void, because it's my belief that with this particular wedge issue, we have a fertile battleground to fight against purity culture and the inhibitions levied against self-expression. What kind of faux freedom of expression do we possess when it is required that in order to express our emotions, we must remove emotion from our expression? Make it make sense, y'all. But without the ability to advocate for ourselves in our own individual ways, we're forced to adjust our very beliefs to make them passable for the liberal establishment. And maybe I'm doomer-pilled, but I don't believe there is much of a difference between that and taking away the very words we need to advocate for ourselves at all. We're already on the doorstep of book burnings being carried out nationwide. Just look at Florida. DeFascist uses personal judgment as justification for dropping the ban hammer on books that mentions things he personally doesn't like. So, for those of you too young to remember, just so you know, Republicans and Christians have never been reasonable per se, but they at least used to resemble human beings. And so the question remains, what will be deemed unacceptable for children next? Though to be fair, I'm honestly surprised America isn't legally authorizing ghettoization of the LGBTQ+ community. Talk about a doomer pill. It's hard to keep the faith when the Democrats are the party that is supposed to be protecting human rights, and they so tragically drop the ball on something as basic as bodily autonomy. Their failure to protect women's rights with the codification of Roe v. Wade is all the necessary proof of their incompetence to be a beacon of hope for the working class. The Black Lives Matter movement was proof of our inability as leftists to trust the liberal establishment, to follow through on our demands for change. We need a movement to gather behind, hopefully something in the image of the Black Panthers, that provides community support for the disenfranchised in order to help gain support for the movement. The only way we can create this power structure separate from our liberal counterparts is through crowdfunding, which is admittedly a big ask. Asking the tired, hungry, and poor huddled masses of this nation for their spare change doesn't exactly feel right. But unfortunately, money is power under capitalism. We do have the resources, though. I personally think Cornbread Tube, as it's being called, could be a good branding to start with. It can specifically be used to create community, which can be used to create an economy. And with the system being fairly decentralized, it will prevent things like another Tulsa race massacre. And with a safe place to gather in like Nebula, it's possible to avoid mass deplatforming. None of this is to suggest, by the way, that this could be accomplished without any substantial roadblocks, but just to suggest the possibility and encourage people either way to watch and listen, the amazing creators that are making up this Cornbread Tube. And somewhere in here fits the line about how the black community has X amount of $1 trillion worth of buying power. But the truth is that 90% of this nation's people have a collective buying power totaling to less than that of the top 10%. But if we have a fund to help those struggling in poverty, we do have a very effective way to draw attention to the community we're trying to build.
You haven't forgotten about me over here.
No, I was saving the best part of the conversation for last.
Oh, good. Because that's the part of the conversation that gets a little dicey, you know what I mean? I'm just so thankful for your attention to detail and the care that you're taking to ensure this gets handled right.
Yep, I'm just a white boy trying to accomplish the bare minimum.
Don't you think you're being a little hard on yourself, bud? With those self-evaluations, huh?
Honestly, no. I think most people are far too concerned with the optics of their perceived deeds rather than their underlying motivations. Furthermore, and what's worse than that, is most white people don't seem incapable but unwilling to analyze the white supremacist frameworks from which they operate. Case in point, Vosh's response to FD Signifier, a masterclass in avoidance of critical thinking and accountability. I mean, you didn't even actually listen to what he said, bro.
Okay, go off, King.
Oh, please, miss me with that King BS. I'd rather you tell me slay, Queen.
Well, shit, I guess some men are just testes.
Okay, so now the pièce de résistance. I know that was terrible. The part where my foot goes in my mouth. Hopefully not. Slurs are very distinctly different in their usage and especially their impact from the words I've been speaking about throughout the video. How they come about usually comes with a bit of an uncomfortable history lesson as well. And it is with that historical context that we find the reasons why some words are bad. Because they're actually harmful. Not that the word picnic is a slur, but trust me, you really don't want to know the history of that word if you don't already. I'm good, honestly, to classify that one as a slur, in my personal opinion. But other than some words with some terrible origins like that one, which should honestly just get phased out of speech over time, slurs are more specifically labels developed through the overuse with the intention of subjugation of a specific group of people. This is something many people fail to understand, is the history that is required to create slurs. We all know the slurs that we know because of their, call it, colored history, through which we lived and participated. Slurs would just be words if not for generations of our predecessors cultivating their meanings. The F word, and no, I'm not talking about fuck, but the slur that was used even through my childhood quite frequently to shame gay people for their personal expression, and even people who don't identify this way, for perceived slights against their enforced gender role. This is a prime example of how slurs hurt us all, even those of us that they're not directed at. They create insecurity and are used to hold all of us to an unrealistic expectation of our expressions. That word is frequently and generally used to ensure men are upholding toxic masculinity. And on the flip side of that coin, we have to talk about the B word. I'm trying to stop using this word personally, as I'm not a woman, and I look at this word much the same as I look at the N word. It is a word used particularly to oppress women, and I think it should be used selectively by women, just the same way that the N word is used culturally among black people. It is used to liken things to femininity, which in our patriarchal society, in essence, is considered culturally bad regardless of our personal intent. Those are just words that I specifically felt the need to mention. So this ever-growing list of bad words came from our blind obedience of puritanical culture enforced by our white supremacist Christian oppressors. And the really ironic part about all that is the current complaints that are quite ill-conceived from the right-leaning pundits of today. They do a whole lot of crying about cancel culture, then they proceed to book every media conglomerate in the nation to cry to millions of people so that they can all feel bad for them. What a way to get canceled. The very existence of slurs is proof of bigoted people's attempts to cancel or restrict individuals' abilities to express themselves in the same way cis-het gender-conforming white men always have. They turn around from being canceled and end up reaching larger audiences by writing a book about how hard life is when you get canceled. While the few people whose entire lives were ruined by one mistake they made while being recorded gets endlessly circled around the internet and held against them because they're not a cis-het gender-conforming white man. I defy each and every one of you to think of one cis-het white man who has been actually canceled and was no longer able to find work later on down the line. I'm pretty sure you won't find any. They always end up turning around and getting paid an excessive amount of money to become a conservative pundit. It is not called getting canceled when a large group of people take issue with something that you said or did. That's called accountability. Losing out on some money because you're a piece of shit with bad opinions is a pretty normal consequence. It is when it goes beyond that backlash to disrupt other aspects of life. Or when someone continues to get harassed after they've made apologies and attempted to acknowledge their wrongdoing. The backlash has to reach a level of severity that actually disrupts a person's life. And if you want to know what that's really like, maybe ask anybody ever heard of Rewired Soul? In FD Signifier's somewhat recent video, about 4 months ago now, Broke Bread, the sequel to Break Bread, which are both excellent videos that everyone should have already seen. If not, go check them out. He showed Rewired Soul's face for just a couple minutes and got a pretty insane amount of backlash. Especially when you consider that he was only trying to point out the stakes of being canceled when you're not a gender-conforming white cishet man. I have a few other video ideas, and I'm hoping to keep bringing my hot takes to the conversation, so hopefully you find it at the very least interesting. My intention with creating this video is to foster conversation, a conversation that we can all learn from. But if you're already in agreement with the totally based takes, then feel free to leave a fuck yeah in the comments. I appreciate any likes or dislikes on the video, and hope you consider subscribing. Thanks for checking out this video, and hope to see you again in the future. Also, I recognize this video is an absolute editing nightmare. It is my first attempt, so judge lightly, but you can expect nothing but improvement in the future. As you can see, I've already discovered the wonders of lighting. So stay safe out there. See you next time.